Hello and welcome to another exciting Blender tutorial. Tonight we're going to be making a really cool sci-fi city using geometry nodes. Let's jump in. Okay, so the plan was today to create a sci-fi city using geometry nodes, but I wanted it to be a circular city. So if we've got like a cylinder, right? And if we have a look at like the faces, see these triangle shapes, I want to have a city that like follows the flow, right, of these shapes. So the buildings become sort of triangular shaped and they fit into this. So as you model this thing out, the buildings change based on the size and shape of the polygon faces for your base object. So that's the idea. So that's what we're going to make today. So it's going to be really fun. Let's get started. I'm going to go Shift A, Mesh, and Cylinder. We're going to start off with a cylinder. So this will be our base of everything. So I'm just with this cylinder already created, I'm just going to drag up, and it doesn't really matter how many faces or sides we have quite yet for this guy. Actually, just so we're consistent, so you can see it, I'm going to go Shift A cylinder and pop this up here. My current settings are radius. I'll just set this radius to 1, and vertices are set to 15. Depth is 2, and these will set your mesh up to be just like mine. Okay, now we're going to take this timeline and we're going to switch it from the timeline view to the geometry node editor. And now we've got our geometry node editor here. We're going to click new to create a new geometry node setup. We'll call this let's call it sci-fi city. We're going to get started. So the first thing we want to do is, let me actually, so we can see things clearly, I'm going to come to my orange tab here for the object properties of the object that's selected. And I'm going to come to visibility, and I'm just going to scroll down to viewport display. Just reveal that, and I'm going to take a wireframe, and that's going to allow us to see the wireframe over the mesh. It just makes it a little easier to visualize what's happening. So what we want to do first is we're going to take these faces. We're going to look at our object, right? And first thing I want is all the faces that are pointing up. So directly up, straight up on the Z level. So everything is pointing straight up. These will be the faces we'll work with. We're going to take those faces and we will duplicate them. So first thing we need to do is detect everything that's pointing up on the Z. And 0 on everything else. So we don't want them pointing up in any direction. Next thing we do is we're going to take those particular faces that meet this criteria, and we're going to duplicate them. So we're going to take these faces and we'll duplicate them, right? And then what we want to do is we want to subdivide them. So make even more mesh out of them, right? And then we're going to extrude each of these new faces up at different intervals, so different amounts, right? At a random level. So we get these random shapes, building shapes sticking up out of the top. Okay, so let's figure this out. I'm going to go Shift A and I'm going to type in let me just get a vector here. I'll explain this visually, okay? We're getting a couple nodes. We're going to grab a normal node and we're going to grab a math node. All right, so what do we need to do? We need to figure out what direction these faces are pointing. Now, if you want to know the direction a face is pointing, you want the normal. That's what the normal is. The normal is always a value of 0 to 1, and it's in the X, Y, and Z. So X could be 1, and Y could be like 0.5, and Z could be 0.1, right? And this represents a direction. They're always either between 0 and 1. They're never higher than 1 or lower than 0. And this particular direction says that, okay, it's pointing completely on the X direction, right? And actually, this would actually be true. It couldn't point like fully on the X while also pointing a little bit on the Y and a little bit on the Z. I hope that makes sense. So this would be, something less, I don't know, 0.8 or something. But if you have something like this where it's 0, 0, 1, that means that it's not pointing at the X and in the X direction at all. It's not pointing in the Y direction at all. It's only pointing in the Z direction. So that's what we want. Everything that meets this criteria. And if you ever want to see your normals, you can visualize them if you go into edit mode. And, oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, I've got this radial menu I'm using to go into edit mode. I didn't even tell you about this. If you go edit, preferences, key map, tab for pi menu. That's how we can get that to work. That's how you do that. If you don't have that, if you hit tab, it'll just go straight into edit mode, right? And then come up here to this little drop down. And you come around here to normals right at the bottom, and you can click this here and you can change the size. And Blender will give you a lovely little render, visual representation of your normals. You can see the direction each face is pointing. So if you can imagine, this is X, this is Y, and up and down is Z, you can imagine how this direction can be represented by 3 numbers based on, how much it's pointing in the direction of each of those different cardinal directions. Okay, so let's turn normals back off so they're not cluttering our view, and we'll go back to object mode. So now that I've explained that, and we know what this is, we're going to compare. So we're going to have a look at all the different functions we have within the math node. One of those that we want is right here, compare. Similar to greater than and less than. So basically we want to figure out which faces equal a certain criteria. So if I hover over this, you can see 1 if A equals B with a tolerance of C. So what that means is you have this epsilon, this is the tolerance. So it's basically going to look at a value and it's going to compare it to this value. And if it's equal to it within this sort of, error or weight threshold, then it'll pump out a 1. All other scenarios, it'll pump out a 0. So how can we use this to get these top faces? Well, first we need to separate the normal. You can see this is a purple output. That means this is a vector. A vector is a set of 3 numbers in Blender that represent a direction, or it could be a color, RG and B, but a set of 3 numbers. So we need to separate that out because you can see these aren't purple, right? These are gray, and that means that they are looking for a floating point number, which is this. Basically, it's a single value that is a decimal with trailing zeros. So let's go for the separate XYZ node. We can drop that here, and we'll take the normal. We're going to plug it in to the vector of this. This will separate this vector into its X, Y, and Z components. And all we want to compare is the Z. We just want to know, is it pointing up on the Z? Is it a 1 on the Z? So we'll take this, we'll plug it into the first value. We'll make this one 1 because this is the value we want to compare to. And we're going to make the epsilon 0 because we're not interested in anything that isn't 1. So we just want this pure 1 value. Now this is going to spit out a 1 or a 0 for every single face on this object. So all of these are going to be zeros, and all these are going to be, actually these are going to be zeros as well because they're pointing down. So this is going to be -1 is the normal on the Z for these guys, which I told you earlier that they don't go negative, which is bad of me because that's not true. Anyways, up here, these are all going to be +1 on the Z. And so these are the only ones that are going to pop through with a 1 attached to them. So now what we can do is we can use that as a selection criteria. So if I come over here and type in duplicate elements, we can drop the duplicate elements node. And I can say, I want to grab this piece of geometry, which is, this is the input. So this is the geometry that we feed, that, this geometry nodes object lives on. Duplicate this geometry, but I don't want you to duplicate all of it. I just want you to duplicate this selection. So this will look for everything that's a 1 and will duplicate that. It won't look for anything that's a 0. So that's kind of how you can use this to create selections. You can use compare, you can use greater than or less than, say, hey, everything that's greater than 2 or greater than 0, greater than 1.5. Those are the ones that we want to be having a 1 associated with them as the value. And then you plug that in, you get a selection. Now you'll notice that this is a dotted line. So this is always telling us whenever we have a dotted line, it's iterating through everything on this piece of mesh. So normal is a dotted line to this vector. So it's going through each face and it's running through this like a loop, right? It's going through this each time it runs. So if you ever want to see all of it, you can visualize things by coming over here and grabbing the spreadsheet viewer. And this will show you everything in your geometry nodes objects. You can see we have 31 objects, and each of these is a vertex in our mesh, and it shows us the position of all of them. So there you go. So it's running through each of these. Now each of these guys has an ID. So this is the ID of every single vertex on our mesh. The faces also have IDs. So these are all the IDs of each face. So everything is as an ID. We're going to use that in a minute. Okay, so bear that in mind. That's how our mesh looks when it's represented in that form. So let's take this geometry output and we'll plug it in here, and you'll see that everything disappears. Wait, that's right. Forgot to switch this. Okay, so let's take this. We don't duplicate any points. We're looking at faces. There we go. So it's duplicated these faces. Now you might be wondering why it's deleted everything else. Well, it hasn't actually deleted everything else. Everything else is still here. It's just that we've piped it into this and we've piped this into our output, and the output is always going to be what you see. So we're only seeing everything that's coming out of the duplicated elements node. So if we want to bring in the other stuff, we can add a join geometry node. We can drop that here, bam, take this and plug it in just like so. And there we go. We got all that combined. So I actually have 2 pieces of mesh. We've got this duplicated bit, and then underneath it, we have this original bit, which lines up perfectly with it. So it doesn't look like there's 2 bits. But anyways, for simplification's sake, we're just going to mute this for now and just look at this group here. So next thing I want to do is subdivide these. Now, what's really great is, actually, let's go ahead and just subdivide mesh, and we'll drop this into the pipe. So now this is going to start subdividing it. which is cool. Now we're gonna get some weird shapes as we subdivide this. Now you could run with this if you want, but I want to actually have even quads, so four-sided faces, none of these triangles things. This will work though. You can keep it like this. But anyways, I'm going to go into edit mode, and you can see my original mesh there. And I want to, let's see, I'm just going to select, I'll get all of these faces down here at the bottom, and also all the ones here at the top. And I'm going to hit X and delete those faces. I've got those with the brush selection, by the way. So I hit C on my keypad, and if you roll your mouse wheel, it gets bigger or smaller. The only trick with it is if you're done using it, you've selected everything you want, you have to hit escape to close it out. So that will take you back to normal selection mode. So now what I'll do is I'm going to grab, go to edge mode and hold down Alt and select this top ring. And I'm going to hit E to extrude and S to scale. And I'm going to scale this in right here, just so there's a gap. Then I might hit E again and grab Z and bring it down. So there's kind of this bit that goes down like that. All right, let's go back to object mode. So now you can see by subdividing this 2 levels, we've now got a bunch of faces within these faces. Now we're going to extrude them. So let's go up here and type in extrude and grab the extrude mesh node and just drop it in here. I might get rid of this one just so it's a bit clearer. We don't have to see that anymore. Now what's cool about this is we have this individual button. And if you turn that on, what that does is it's going to extrude each individual face separately. So it won't connect everything. If I turn that off, you can see that it's kept them all connected. But by turning that on, now they're all separate. That means that each of these faces, even though they're all offset by 1, the same amount, looks like they're all even, but we can actually break this up. They can extrude each face separately. So we need to get a new selection of everything and get a random value for the height. So let's go ahead and type in random. Let's start with that. And we'll grab random value, and we're going to be plugging this into the scale here. So the offset scale basically determines how much to offset the face after it's extruded. So this is a floating point number. You can see it's gray, right? So that means we can use a floating point number here. If you were using, if you wanted to create a random vector, you could switch to vector or integer or Boolean. We're going to keep that like that. And I'll keep the min at 0 and the max at 1. And you can see right here, it says ID. Remember that list spreadsheet thing? So each face has its own ID. Well, all these new faces have their own ID as well. And we can grab their ID by just grabbing the ID node. So I'll grab ID and we'll plug it in here. And it's called index for ID, right? And we can take this value now and plug this in here. And now it's going to go through every face and it'll generate a new random number for each face as it goes through this loop. And the random values will always be between 0 and 1. Now we can make one of these -1 to drop a few of these below the ground, just to kind of hide some. So we've got a little more variation. And we can also play with how high we want these buildings to go. Very cool. All right, now what I want to do next is I am going to, I'm going to join up I'm going to do that join geometry thing again. So let's grab join geometry, plop that one right here at the end. And we'll take this one and we'll plug it in here as well. So now they're together. Okay, and I'm also going to turn off wireframe from the visibility. Now, what I want to do next is let's go into edit mode. You can see if I grab the faces, right? And we probably don't need it to be this tall either. I can just grab this edge loop and bring it up a bit. So if I grab the faces and I hit E to extrude, right? And then S to scale, it's going to scale, but it's not creating faces. It's not creating any more buildings, right? And that's because these faces aren't pointing directly up. You can see they've got an angle. If I hit Shift and Z, it will turn off scaling on the Z. So now the top of all these are going to be perfectly flat. So now I can actually extrude this and I will get buildings. So I could do that maybe once to get a little bit of an extra ring. But then what I could do is I could hit E to extrude and S to scale. And let's just scale it normally a little bit so it goes up, right? And then E again, S to scale, Shift Z, flatten that one out like so. So now I've got this gap, right? Where I've got this like street almost. Okay, E again, scale this up. Maybe grab this down like that. E, scale like that. E and scale, Shift Z. And then maybe one more E, scale, and grab this down. And one more, scale that out, grab that down. So it'd be cool to have something, right, for these angled bits where we don't have any buildings. But what we can also do is we can come in, we can grab some of these edges and I can grab them. And as I move them around, you'll see we lose buildings in certain sections. So I can create cool little gaps like that. Again, it's all because of the angle of the face. So I can use this to create some cool variety and shape. Now, if you want to make a face perfectly flat, you can grab it and hit S for scale and Z and then 0, and that will flatten it out. But I actually don't want to do that for this one. All right, so let's create something for everything else. So right now we've got this whole bit, right? And it pipes off everything that's pointing straight up. But what about the rest of it? So instead of compare, let's Shift D, come up here, and let's switch this to less than. And let's grab the Z as the value again. And we want to grab everything that's less than 1. So whenever Z goes off 1, that means it's pointing in another direction, even just a tiny bit. It'll come up this way. Let's duplicate that geometry. So I'll grab this as the selection, and I'll grab our hero geometry, and I'll bring that in here. And then what I'll do is I will take another subdivide, but I'm going to subdivide this one less, and I'll bring that mesh in. I might pipe this one up to 3 just to make it all a little bit denser as well. And let's take this. I'll make a new extrude mesh, and I'll plug this one in, and I'll get a new random value and a new index. And I'll just bring these here, make a little bit more room. And I'll take this value as the selection. And now this one I'm going to go a lot smaller, right? Maybe even keep it at 0. And then I will take this, and I'm going to join this up right here, and we can get rid of the other one now. We don't need that. Oh, I see. I've got it in the wrong bit. I should have plugged that into selection. This is the offset scale. There we go. Cool. So now this section has some interesting life to it. It's not just these bits here. So now I can use this to create all kinds of cool city structures. So let's come over here, and you could take individual bits like this and hit extrude, grab Shift Z and bring it out. Oh, that's really cool. I didn't mean to do that. It's a little hard to see the base geometry. There we go. Bring that out like that, or I could even just keep grabbing the loop. Oops. Do that again. It's kind of interesting. What is going on with that? It's kind of cool. Let's grab this one up. Take Y, scale Z 0. I'll put some buildings on that one. All right, I might join in the base one as well, just so that everything that goes super low, we still have some kind of ground plane for. It's looking really cool. Might bring the height down a little bit. I feel like it's blocking too much of the overall city. That's good. Don't want it to get too massive. Let's add in a little more detail to this by just creating a few extra elements, kind of like little greebles that we can use to iterate across everything. So we're going to create some new collections. We're going to come over here to our scene collections, and I'm going to click on the scene collection itself and click this little icon here to create a new collection. And I'm going to call this, let's see, Tower Tops, and click on the scene collection, create a new collection, and we'll call this one Tower Sides. And let's take all of this stuff and let's just hide it for now. And right here in Tower Tops, let's make a few simple antennae. So I'm going to go Shift A, and I'm going to create a cube, and I'll scale it down. And I will let's see, focus in on it by hitting full stop on my number keypad. I'm going to edit mode, and I'll go into face mode and grab that top face, and I'll hit I to inset and just drag down, and then E to extrude, Z to lock it on the Z, bring it up, maybe scale it down, E, and let's see, I will scale it down, and then E, scale it way down, and then E, and bring it up. So there we go. I might hit Control R and do a few loop cuts here, and then Control B to bevel those loop cuts. There we go, Control B. And then what I can do is hit E and just scale those in a touch. Looks pretty good. There we go. So I've got one tower, and I can call this Tower Top. And let's make a few more. I might just Shift D to duplicate this one, hide the other one. So I'm just looking at one. Go into edit mode, and let's make this just a little bit different. So I'll hit 3 to grab faces, and I will scale this up. Shift Z to lock it on the X and Y, turning off the Z. I'll maybe scale that down, bring this one down like that. Go to transparent mode maybe, and I'll just box select all these and scale them up, Shift Z. I might take this intersection and scale it up like so, and this one. It's pretty good. Alt click to grab this and scale it down. Scale that, bring it down maybe. Grab that top. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Now I will want this to be sitting on the origin, so I'm going to go back to edit mode, hit A to select Alt, and then grab Z, and just bring it up to line it up with roughly the bottom there. Take my other tower. I might make this one quite small relative to the other one, so A and scale it all down, and then bring it down here. That's good. And then we'll take this one, turn that one back off, go into edit mode. I actually just might take the base of this one and bring it up so it's close to the origin. Perfect. All right, there's 2 towers. Let's make one more. Shift A, cylinder, scale it down, grab that up, and let's go into edit mode, grab that top, delete that face, go into edge mode, alt click that loop, E to extrude, scale, grab Z, bring it up, and then E, scale, in, and then E, and grab Z. We'll bring this one down. I just went down with it, and then E, scale, E, and grab Z, bring it up, and like that. And then maybe I'll fill the top, so I'll just hide these. You can see what happens here. I'll just go F3, grid fill, and that'll fill that top section for me there. There we go. I might right click shade smooth. Nah, let's shade flat. I kind of like shading flat for that. All right, cool. So I've got 3 different tower tops. So 2, and I'll call this one tower top 03. Turn those off. Now tower sides, what we'll do is we'll click that collection. We'll go here and create a cube. And I'll just grab it up and scale it down. And I might go into edit mode and scale Y like that. And create some loop cuts. And then go into face mode and then just extrude some faces. So do a couple loop cuts. Control R, Control B to bevel those loop cuts. E, grab Y, bring those out. Scale X a bit. Maybe scale Y. Maybe that's what I'm going to do. It's kind of nice. Just to create some little detailed bits, like so. I will apply the scale and the location. So I'm going to go apply, because if you look here, right, we've got some, I've moved it up on the Z and I've scaled it. So I'm going to go F3, apply all transforms, and I'll just set those all back to 0. So this will be the set sort of standard transform. And I also might do the same for our tower tops. Reapply all transforms. There we go. So that just cleans it up, so as they'll behave as we expect them to. For this, what I might do is hit A to select all and grab Z. I might center it up on the origin. I think that might give me a better result. All right, so I'll call this a side. And let's create another cube. Go into edit mode, scale it down, scale Y, scale Z. Let's see, what can we do for this? Let's Control B to bevel all the sides and just drag that down like that. And then maybe 3, and let's E, grab Z, bring it up. And then let's do some loop cuts here in the middle like that. Grab that one, E, grab Y, bring it out, and then maybe an inset. Grab Y to bring it forward, and then maybe another inset, and then an E and grab Y to bring it in. That's a pretty cool piece. Call this another side. I'll put it into tower sides. And maybe one more. Let's grab this one. Go into edit mode. And what should we do with this one? Let's scale it down. I might bevel just the sides this time. So alt clicking to grab the sides. And it's going to do the whole thing. Let's grab edge mode. And I will select the outer sides. Control B to bevel. Bring those in. Might roll the mouse wheel. That will create these kind of curved bits, which is kind of cool. And then scale X. And then let's grab the top and the bottom. I to inset those. And then scale Z. We'll kind of bring them up like that. All right, so we've just got some random pieces. All right, I'm going to call this side. And I will drag it into tower sides. I can deactivate it, and we can turn on our GeoNode City again. So now what we can do is we can select one of the GeoNode City objects and get a nice view so we can see it. We can instance these guys onto the surfaces. So let's do the tops first. We just want to instance on the towers, okay? And I just want to take the tops of the towers and randomly place a couple of the tower tops. So let's remember which section where we're creating our towers. It was this first bit here, right? So this section is what we want to be looking at. So I'm going to take this extrude mesh, and I want to have a look at, well, I've got these options at the top. I could probably just use this as a selection. So let's type in distribute points on bases. And what we're going to do is, let's create a bit more room. Drag all this over here. And we'll get this group here, bring this down, because we're going to need to be kind of working in this little gap right here. Bring this right down here. We're going to grab the mesh, plop it into here, and then we want to use the selection of the tops. This will be the tops of our extruded bit, which is just the tops of these towers. And the points that we're going to get here are going to give us our towers. Now to simplify things, I'm just going to unplug my output and bring it over here. I'll plug this in. This will show me what I want. So it's not quite right, is it? Is that right? I don't think it's right. It looks like it's giving me a lot more than what I want. I could turn that density right down. Maybe it is right. Maybe it is correct. Let's just try it. So these points represent all the different tops. And what we're going to do is on these guys, we're going to distribute our towers. So let's we're going to grab a collection info node, and we'll just drop it here. And we're going to grab the tower tops collection. And we're going to use this as our instances. So we're going to go instance on points. There it is, instance on points. We'll drop this here. So now the points are coming into here. We're going to take these as the instances. We're going to click pick instance. And we also want to go for, I forget what it is, original, separate children, and reset children. No, it's not going to do anything. I think that'll do it. That's going to randomly pick the different towers. I'll turn my density down even more, so I don't want too many of these guys. All right, that looks kind of cool. Now let's see if that worked. We might need to change the scale. So we're going to join this up with everything. So I will unplug this group and bring this back over, plug it into the geometry. We'll take this and we'll plug it into here. Now we can see that, yes, indeed, it is appearing in the correct spot, but they're all probably a little bit too big. So let's take all of these instances and scale them right down. So I just shift selected and dragged down to get to change the scale of all those at the same time. Now we could put a random value on this as well. That could be, potentially a good idea. See how that looks from our camera's point of view. That's pretty cool. Definitely add some detail. I'll just change that scale a little bit. It'd be nice to have some random Z rotation that will help break up everything. So let's get some random numbers going. So let's go for a random value, drop that here, and let's go for a combine XYZ node. We just want to rotate it on the Z at different points, not anything else. So we'll just have a random value between 0 and 1 is fine. And we'll plug that into the Z. And I will grab the ID. I will plug this into the ID node. And then what we can do is take this vector and plug it in here. This will randomly rotate all of them between 0 and 1. So that's going to be fine. We can do the same for the scale. So we could probably scale them all randomly. So we can grab a random value and switch this to vector. And maybe put all these to like, I don't know, 0.2. And have the max be 1. So let's just see what happens when we plug this in. So that's going to work. I guess it uses an ID automatically, so we don't need this. Yeah, we don't need that. So there we go. So that's going to randomly scale them, but 1's probably a bit too big, so I will bring 1 down. All right, I've gone for a smaller look. I think that'll be good. Now let's do the sides. So we want to do the same thing, but instead of the tops, we want to actually work with the sides, which I think we'll have. Yeah, here we go. We'll have them here. And we'll just take the same basic setup that we've got here. Might even just shrink these up a little bit and take all of this. Let's move it back some. Take this, just move it over a little bit more. What we can do is we can take these and we can Shift D to duplicate, and we can grab the side, right, as the selection. Okay, and then we can grab the mesh as the input, and then instead of tower tops, we're going to switch to tower sides, and then we're going to take these instances and join them in as well. Now we're going to have to change our rotations. And our density is way too high. Keep this at 0.5 so it doesn't tank my system. And let's see, I want to. Now I don't know if we want to randomly rotate these guys. So let's unplug the rotation and the scale and zero out that rotation. All right, now let's find a cool angle on this thing, and then what we can do is frame up a shot. So let's go Shift A. I'm going to create a camera. I'm going to hit 0 to jump into my camera. I'm going to open up my side view. The camera selected. Click right here under View Lock, Camera to View. Now I can zoom out and get a cool angle on my city. Something like this. I might come to my camera tab, go Viewport Display, and turn up Passport 2. And maybe I'll make my lens a little bit wider so we get even more of the city in view. Come around here. And then we can also take this and Shift D, grab Z, move it out, and rotate, and just get some other city structure bits like this. You could even like individually scale these guys, right? Like that. Now I'm going to switch to rendered view. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create a nice material to go on it. So I'm going to create a light. So create a sun lamp, just rotate it, and then like find a nice angle. Something like this is fine. I'll make sure that my angle is right down to 0 because I want this to be like a sun. And then I might Shift D to duplicate, rotate Z, bring it around, and then rotate off to the side like this. And I'll turn this one up, maybe bring it around behind. Something kind of cool to get 2 types of light. Maybe the second light will give it a bit of a blue hue. That. Great. All right, now let's take this. We're just going to open up our shader editor. And I'll pull this up here, and we're going to create a new material. We're going to call this our city, but we need to assign it. We can't assign it normally. We have to go into geometry nodes. And at the very end here, we're going to grab a material node, set material, drop it here, and we're going to call this city. Now it'll work. So now if we come over to our shader editor, there we go. Now first thing I want to do is like put some atmosphere in this so we have a bit of haze. So I'm going to go from object to world, and I'm going to go Shift A, search volume scatter, and we'll drop this here, plug that into the volume. And I'm going to make the density 0.1, maybe 0.05, 0.025. I'm just halving it. I'll play with the anisotropy a little bit. But we definitely want some city haze here so that things get thick as we go back. Great. I'm also going to go over to my render tab, just get my render settings set up. I'm going to turn on ambient occlusion, bloom, and screen space reflections. That'll make it look nice and Eevee. Now I can switch back to my object shader in the shader editor, and we can get to work creating a super cool material for this city landscape. Let's do it. We're going to give it a dark color. So I'll bring it down to a dark gray. I'm also going to take the roughness down so that it really starts to reflect the environment nicely, but not too much, not too much. And then we're going to come over here and we're going to grab a Voronoi texture. And with this Voronoi texture, we're going to switch it to, let's see, we're going to go with Manhattan. And I will grab a bump node, drop this here, and a color ramp. And drop this here. We're going to create some extra detail on this. Now, what I might do is I want to turn off scene world just so we're not looking at that fog. We can just see what this is going to do for us. So I'm going to take this distance and I'll plug it into the factor, and I'll take this color and plug it into the height, and then I'll take this and plug it into the normal. All right, now I'm going to drag these around, and I'll take my scale up. I don't see any effect though. What's going on? Oh, distance needs to go into the height. There we go. All right, cool. Now let's take this and I'm going to bring this pretty close here. And I might actually switch this from linear, switch this to constant. And now it's be a bit easier for me to drag around. I can actually find the spot that's going to give me the best result. So I can drag this and we'll see we get different shapes. Kind of cool. Let's just have a look at Chibichev. I'm bringing my scale way up with this one, I think. We get a lot of density on those lines. And I'm going to take my distance down to like 0.1, maybe even a bit less. Just a little bit. 0.01 looks good. Might be different for you. But what that does is the smaller that gets, basically we're saying the surface is smaller and smaller and smaller. And it just helps calculate the bump so it looks a bit better. You can see the light wraps on this a lot nicer. That's pretty cool. Now, what we could do is also use this to drive some emission, but I don't think that's going to look as nice. So what we'll do is we'll create some random, basically just, flecks of light that go across maybe just the sides of these objects. But before we do that, let's create some random patches of color. So I'm going to use this same setup here. In fact, we can just use the same node, but I'll create a different color ramp. And I'll drag this up and I'll plug this into the base color. And now what I'll do is I'll take the black and I will switch it to sort of that darkish gray that we had. I'll take this one down as well, but maybe go all the way with that. All right, now let's create some cool lighting to really kind of get this thing to start looking neat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of my sun lamps, this blue one that I've got, and I'm actually going to turn it so it's underneath everything. And then I'm going to turn the strength right up so we get this kind of like cut through that's going on. Oh, actually, that looks kind of nice too, doesn't it? Just move this around till we get a cool look. This one around. Get the strength on it a little bit. Maybe take the angle of this one up so it spreads more. This will help fill out scene some. Give this one a little bit of an orange color. Then I'm going to go Shift A light, point light, and turn it right up, maybe to 100. And I'm going to put this one, put it right in the middle here, all this stuff. Make it 500. Let's go nuts. Got this cool hole like right in the middle. I think that might that would be a neat spot for like a really bright light. Quite as dramatic as I thought it would be. Could just be because it's too hidden. Bring it out a little bit. Maybe duplicate that one and put a few more somewhere else. Let's try changing the color of the fog. See what that does. Now, it'd be really neat if the sides of these buildings had a slightly different material. It had lights and had reflections that were a bit different from the main base structure. So in order to pull that off, what we can do is let's get over to geometry nodes and select our object. We'll come over here to where we've got our material being set. And I can add another material here. And we can set the selection to the sides of our buildings, which is, which group? Here. Yep. So we need to grab this one. I'm grabbing the side output, and I'll bring that over here. There we go. And then let's come over to the material tab, and we'll create another material here, grab the city, and then I'm going to click this little double paper icon to make it a duplicate. And now I can call this building side. And then we can swap this to building sides. This will assign the building sides to the sides of the extruded objects. So now if we come over to our shader editor and go to our object shader, and if we work on building sides by selecting it here, we can change things, and it's only going to affect the buildings themselves, which is great. I'm going to create some, or do a similar thing. The Voronoi color ramp, distance into the factor, and I'll plug this into the emission. And I'll turn that strength up. And I'll bring this down. And then I'll take the scale like way up, like that, right? Playing with the random value kind of lines them up a little bit if we lower it. And that's kind of a cool, it's a cool look. You know, I really feel like sometimes emission on as building lights like kills the realism. Like, it makes me want to come to this and actually take this out of emission and just let this be like the building color. Now I'm just playing with the mesh to see if we can't get a more compelling shape. I'm insetting with I, and then extruding with E. Insetting is great for creating some extra density. It looks really nice, I think. That's cool, that kind of looming shape in the distance. Look at these like city wall kind of things. This. Oh, that's neat. Look at that. Okay, I'm liking this a lot now. Funny how that just a little bit of a change. Hey, so as promised, I did jump back into the project file and mess around a little bit more. I don't know if this is necessarily better. It's probably better a little bit. I mean, if you look at the other version that we had, Let me just grab. This is what the previous render looked like that we did. And this is what it looks like now. So it's definitely more dramatic. The lighting's a lot better. I just thought I'd talk you through what I did. Wasn't feeling super confident to do it under recording and just wanted to play around with it on my own just to kind of land something. But basically what I did was I just repositioned the different structures that we had at the different main, the cylinders, the master sort of city blocks. I just repositioned them into this different composition. And then the main thing that I did that's different to that previous one is in my world shader, I just went over here and I got an HDRI called Evening Meadow _ I've got a 2K resolution of it. And this is from HDR Haven, which you can check out. I will put a link in the description. Amazing free HDRIs all over the place. Polyhaven is the name of the website. So if you go to Polyhaven, you can look at HDRIs. You'll be able to download this for yourself. But I grabbed the Evening Meadow one. You could probably get a better one. Probably a sunset one would look a little bit better than this, but I just had this one handy, so I threw it in. And I've put in a texture coordinate node and a mapping node, and I've used this to kind of rotate it around to get the sun in that HDRI kind of right there. So it's kind of flaring right next to my building. Then the other thing I did was into our volume scatter node, I put a noise texture and a color ramp into the color. I've got my density set to 0.07 and my anisotropy is 0.836. So, and this color ramp, I've got like a light sort of dusty brown and a dark brown color. And then I've got my noise texture, my scale is turned right down to 0.1. And then I've got a fair amount of detail and roughness turned into it. And what a small scale does, is it means the noise pattern gets quite large. And you get these really nice kind of cloud effects. It doesn't just look like noise in the scene. And I brought them together like this in the color ramp to kind of bring out the contrast. So you actually get stronger difference between the fog and where there is no fog. So yeah, and then the last thing I did, which was a little bit different, is I made 2 new point lights. And I stuck one just off the side of the buildings here to give that highlight. And I stuck another one right down here just to put one more little highlight and kind of brighten up this section. You can see if I turn those off, it kind of just gets a little bit flat. So they just lift the image a touch there. And that's it. That's all I did to kind of land this image in a much better way, I think. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and check out the Patreon. You can get this project file if you join this month or next month. So check the publish date of this video to see if you can grab it. Yeah, also you can get the full uncut version of this tutorial over there. This is a really long one. I go into a lot of playing around with the materials and lighting and do all kinds of crazy stuff. So if you want to learn how to get to this final image and go through all the detail, head over there. There's hours of extra content on the Patreon, so it's worth checking out. Thanks so much for watching. I will catch you in the next tutorial. Until then, have a fantastic week. See you later. Bye.